Silk sheets, golden domes, perfume drifting through moonlit corridors. That's the fantasy. Here's the reality. If you were a concubine in the Sultan's harem, you had a 99% chance of never seeing your 30th birthday. You were property. Bought, sold, discarded. You could be strangled with a silk cord tonight and replaced tomorrow. And yet we keep hearing the same romanticized myths. A life of luxury, a palace of pleasure. But step inside Topkapi Palace, past the marble courtyards and jewel-inlaid doors, and you'll find the truth is far darker than the fantasy. Today we're gonna walk through the horrifying realities of life in the Ottoman harem, from psychological warfare to state-sanctioned murder, and expose how absolute power turned human lives into disposable commodities. Forget the rose petals, forget the romance. If you were a concubine in the Ottoman Sultan's harem, the only thing those silk sheets guaranteed was that you'd die wrapped in luxury you never asked for. You've seen the paintings, right? The ones with women draped in shimmering fabrics, lounging on cushions, sipping sherbet from crystal goblets. That image is pure marketing. The real harem? Imagine maximum security prison, but swap the concrete walls for marble courtyards, the metal bars for gilded gates, and the guards for eunuchs who answered directly to the most powerful man in the empire. From the moment you stepped inside Topkapi Palace, freedom ceased to exist. You didn't come here to visit, you came here to disappear. The gates locked behind you, and for most, they never opened again. The harem wasn't a love story, it was a control system. Hundreds of women, stolen, bought, or gifted to the Sultan, lived stacked in dormitories behind guarded doors. They weren't ladies in waiting, they were property organized and categorized like royal inventory. And the rules? They were designed to remind you of your place every single second. The air smelled of incense, but it couldn't mask the constant tension. Whispers traveled faster than light. Every gaze from a higher-ranked concubine could be a threat. Every visit from a eunuch could be a summons, or a death sentence. Historical ledgers from the 16th century list concubines alongside furniture, jewels, and horses, their value calculated down to the last coin. One entry even priced a young woman lower than a ceremonial dagger. Think about that. So when we call it a gilded prison, we mean it. The gold wasn't for you, it was for the man who owned you. And how did you get there in the first place? Nobody volunteered. You didn't apply for this. You didn't get discovered. One day you were a daughter, a sister, maybe even a wife, and the next you were cargo. The supply chain of the Ottoman harem wasn't romantic, it was industrial. Most concubines didn't come from Istanbul at all. They were taken from the farthest reaches of the empire, the Caucasus, Eastern Europe, North Africa. Slave traders targeted villages like wolves circling sheep. Sometimes they raided in the night, smashing doors, dragging girls out by their hair, ignoring their mother's screams. Sometimes they bought them from desperate families who believed the Sultan's palace would take care of them. That was a lie. The most coveted were teenage girls with pale skin, light eyes, and long hair. Traits considered exotic and valuable in the Ottoman court. But value wasn't protection. Value was just the price tag that determined how much profit someone made off your body. Once captured, you began the journey to Istanbul, shackled in caravans, crammed into boats, or marched for weeks without shoes. Disease, hunger, and assault were constant threats. If you survived, you were taken to the slave markets, where buyers for the palace examined you like livestock. You were processed, rebathed, reclothed, renamed, your old identity erased. Palace records show girls as young as 8 being brought into the harem. Their training could last years before they were considered ready to serve the Sultan. And yes, serve meant exactly what you think it means. When you finally reached the harem gates, it didn't matter if you fought, cried, or begged. The moment they closed behind you, your past no longer existed. You were in the system now, and the system didn't let go. Once inside, that's when the real nightmare began. In the harem, your own body could betray you, and the clock was always ticking. Life inside wasn't just about obeying rules. It was about surviving a system that weaponized your biology against you. You weren't a person. You were a vessel. Your only true currency, the ability to give the Sultan a healthy son. Every month was a gamble. Menstruation meant you were out of commission. And if that bad timing overlapped with the Sultan's interest in you, your absence could be fatal. Miss one chance and he might never call for you again. And here's the cruel irony. Pregnancy was both your best shot at protection and the fastest way to make enemies. Conceiving a son elevated you above most other women overnight, but it also painted a target on your back. The harem was a snake pit of jealous rivals and scheming attendants, all willing to poison your food or sabotage your care to keep you from rising too high. One concubine named Aishi reportedly lost her place after eunuchs accidentally gave her spoiled sherbet during pregnancy, leading to a miscarriage. No one was punished. weren't. It was just palace politics. The constant surveillance made trust impossible. Paranoia wasn't just a side effect, it was policy. The Sultan's court deliberately kept the women divided, ensuring they would compete against each other rather than unite against him. In this world, beauty wasn't a blessing, it was a curse with an expiration date. As soon as your looks faded or your body failed to produce an heir, you were done. And done didn't mean you got to go home, it meant you were disposable. When the Sultan decided you were finished, you didn't get a trial, you got a method. Execution in the Ottoman harem wasn't some chaotic, spur-of-the-moment rage. It was a procedure. Efficient, silent, and terrifyingly elegant. The two most common fates? The silk cord and the sack in the sea. The silk cord was almost poetic in its cruelty. Two palace executioners would appear at your door in the dead of night. No shouting, no ceremony. Just a silent nod, a loop of cord around your neck, and a swift, practiced pull until you stopped moving. Your body would be removed before sunrise, as if you had simply ceased to exist. Then there was the sea punishment, drowning in a weighted sack. This was often reserved for women who became pregnant without the Sultan's permission, or for entire groups he wanted gone at once. You'd be tied into a heavy, leather-bound bag, then thrown from a boat into the dark waters of the Bosphorus. Sultan Ibrahim Bafriz, known to history as Ibrahim the Mad, is said to have ordered the execution of his entire harem of nearly 300 women in 1648. Why? Rumor had it that one of them had an affair. No investigation, no proof, just a command. And by morning, hundreds of sacks bobbed briefly in the water before sinking. Death in the harem was designed to be invisible, but inside those walls, every woman knew. One wrong word, one wrong glance, one shift in the Sultan's mood, and you could vanish overnight. And yet, even for the women who lived, the nightmare didn't end. Let's strip away the last layer of fantasy. The harem was not a romantic palace of seduction. It was a system of institutionalized sexual slavery. Consent didn't exist. When the Sultan's interest fell on you, there was no option to say no. Before that night ever came, you'd be subjected to a physical inspection by palace eunuchs, who would evaluate everything from your face to your hips. Their job wasn't to see if you were healthy, it was to see if you were useful for producing heirs. If you became pregnant, you were locked into a paradox. Carrying the Sultan's son could elevate you to the highest rank. On the other hand, that son's life would forever be under threat from the Ottoman law of fratricide. Under this law, when a prince became sultan, it was legal for him to have his brothers executed. That meant a mother could give birth to the future ruler, or watch her child be strangled with a silk cord by his own half-brother. Mehmed III, upon taking the throne in 1595, had 19 of his brothers and half-brothers strangled in a single night. Imagine the mothers who lived to see that. But here's the part that might be the most disturbing of all. None of this was chaos. It was all official policy. These weren't crimes of passion, they were line items in a budget. One of the most chilling truths about the Ottoman harem is that its horrors were standard operating procedure. Every woman had a ledger entry recording her purchase price, age, and origin. There was an execution protocol manual, and yes, there was a budget for it. Historical archives reveal expense lists that include payments for new silk cords, special weighted sacks, and boat rentals for those midnight drownings. Some death records were deliberately falsified. Instead of execution, they'd write melancholy or sudden illness. What this all proves is that the harem's cruelty wasn't a flaw in the system, it was the system. But eventually, this machine ground to a halt, not because the rulers saw the light, but because the empire itself began to crumble. The harem didn't end with a rescue, it ended with a collapse. By the early 20th century, the Ottoman Empire was rotting from within. In 1922, the last sultan was deposed, and the imperial family was exiled. The hundreds of women still in the harem were suddenly free. But freedom came after entire lifetimes of captivity. Some were sent back to countries they barely remembered. Others, with no family and no skills, drifted into poverty. In interviews, some surviving concubines admitted they missed the harem, not because it was good, but because they didn't know how to function without the palace walls. One woman described standing in a market, unable to buy bread because she had never held money in her life. The harem didn't end because of moral outrage. It ended because the empire itself collapsed. Yet today, the harem has been sanitized into a tourist attraction. Guides talk about silk cushions and exquisite baths, glossing over the strangulations, the drownings, and the psychological warfare that defined life there. So when you see the polished tiles and golden domes of Topkapi Palace today, remember this: every inch of that beauty was built on a system where women were property, and property could be destroyed at will. Absolute power doesn't just corrupt, it devours. The story of the Ottoman harem isn't about romance, it's about what happens when human beings are reduced to inventory. For centuries, the Sultan's word meant life or death. The silk cord around a neck, the weighted sack sinking into the Bosphorus, the baby taken from a mother's arms. The central truth remains: when people are property, their humanity is erased. And when cruelty is written into law, it becomes policy. And here's why this matters now. The same patterns repeat, maybe not in a gilded palace, but in trafficking networks and forced labor camps and systems where consent doesn't exist. Every time we romanticize the harem, we help erase the voices of the women who lived and died there, voices that were silenced then, and are in danger of being forgotten now. So here's your takeaway. Question the myths. Look past the marble floors and jeweled walls. And when history offers you a beautiful story, ask who paid the price for it. If this opened your eyes, don't let it stop here. Share this with someone who still believes the harem was a fantasy. Leave a comment with the part of this history that shocked you most, because talking about it is the first step to breaking the romanticized lies. And subscribe, because next time, we're going even deeper into another chapter of history's nightmares.